Hello, ladies and gentlemen. On Tuesday, we had a last show of 2024, and today is our first show for 2025. My name is Sasha Star. It's a Ukrainian talk show on POD TV, and I would like to introduce Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Okay, excellent. I'm not sure if anybody else is joining us so far, but if
they're probably still recovering from the New Year situation.
Yeah, okay, we'll be glad to have that. In the meantime, let's talk about what's coming up in the situation between Ukraine and Russia. I'm hesitant about calling it a situation because it's a brutal aggression of Russia against proud Ukrainian people. And I was looking at statistics of the opinion of Ukrainians regarding all possible peace proposals and annexation of its territory by Russia, even if it's temporary. And it appears to me that on any polls, well over 51% of Ukrainians are against making any peace based on losing the territory under all kinds of scenario.
Well, because it simply rewards Russia for its aggression. That's very clear, very plain and simple.
Absolutely. And a lot of commentators, including Western commentators from Western Europe, they're coming to the conclusion that the war will last well into 2026. The peace in 2025 is virtually impossible because, and Ukraine is actually doing very smart tactics. They are against peace as proposed by United States lately. But they are not being vocal about it, at least until now, simply because there is someone else who is very vocal. It's Mr. Putin, who rejects all proposals of the United States. Now, if that's the case, then all these proposals will be rejected by Russia, and therefore Ukraine doesn't have to even comment on this proposal, whether it agrees or not. It doesn't matter, because it will be derailed by Putin. So if that's the case, the next stage, I don't know which one will take, but it really doesn't matter a lot. One is that Trump will say, well, I tried, it doesn't work, I'll have to go back to playing golf. Number two, he may, but it doesn't picture him that well, and he is very conscious of how he will look throughout all this process. So another logical way of dealing with the situation would be to arm Ukraine to its teeth and get very substantial victories on the war field, and then ask his friend Putin, so what do you think about that? How do you feel, and would you like to reconsider your rejections of peaceful proposals? And peaceful proposals, what's interesting enough, there is a lot of discussion going back and forth, and with Trump or without Trump, and the Kellogg and all other so-called experts. But Putin hasn't changed even 1 millimeter of his position. His position is very simple. Yes, I agree to peace talks. However, that should include reality on the battlefield. And that reality is that we need, beside Crimea, 4 regions of Ukraine, which two of them, actually all of them, have not been conquered by Russians in full. They control a lot of territories, but they haven't conquered them. And in places like Zaporizhia and Kherson, they don't even control the capitals of these regions. However, I want all that. I want Ukraine, when lately he was asked whether he would agree for Ukraine not to join NATO in next 10 years, maybe even 20, he said, no, I'm not interested in that. So that means that he wants to keep Ukraine out of NATO for the next 555 years. I don't know what the number is. It's ridiculous.
Beyond his lifetime in any case.
Yeah, for sure. But you know that his daughters are working on the materials that could prolong life, and they're doing a lot of experiments and so on. Putin wants to live until 175. And for that, of course, he needs awesome help. And maybe his daughters are equipped with a special talent how to prolong life, but we'll see. And that's from.
I believe that God may have the last word on that.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, I totally agree with you. Then what he wants, the Ukrainian force, the military will be reduced to 80,000 men, and they would allow to have probably 5 to 10 tanks, no aviation, no Western people in Ukrainian territory. So essentially, that means that Putin can rule Ukraine simply by telephone. And if something doesn't go right, he will resume the war against non-existent Ukrainian army, no weapons, and no Western help. And that makes all his proposal absolutely ridiculous and even violent, I would say. And I'm surprised that these peace proposals are still discussed seriously back and forth instead of Ukraine and US and Western Europe concentrating on defeat Russia and Putin. That's the only way how you can handle this situation. And if you go back to history, 1938 and 39 up to 45, it opens everything for you. You have to be a moron not to understand the lessons of history. So then why everybody is, in your opinion, discussing so much so-called peaceful proposals?
Well, they would rather talk about that than face the reality. The reality is too uncomfortable to talk about. The reality is, they would be in a state of denial similar to the way that the Western powers were before World War One. Everybody thought that World War One was going to be a very quick, neat, and tidy affair, and they were absolutely wrong. And in this case, Putin, the political objectives of Russia and Ukraine are irreconcilable. There is no compromise possible between the two positions. So the only realistic approach for the West to take, given the fact that Putin and his other leaders have been talking about taking other territories, making propaganda about taking back Alaska. It's just insane the way that they are talking about expanding their goals beyond just Ukraine, which when you take all of the Russian pronouncements in their entirety and you consider them and that what Russia is after, Russia demands capitulation. They demand capitulation and total acquiescence to Russian foreign policy goals, which in this case involves the complete and total subjugation of Ukraine. And the Ukrainians are unalterably against that. They will never stand for that. So now it is going, oddly enough, in a strange way, the outgoing Biden administration has actually done the incoming Trump administration a favor by rushing all of this additional military aid, getting out there, committed to Ukraine and getting it delivered. They their mind because they think that the Trump administration is just going to throw Ukraine to the wolves, which, as we are now seeing, is not the case. What Trump would prefer, his ideal solution, would be for, in his America First philosophy, he would, encourage all the NATO members to donate their required minimum of 2%, step up there because they're the ones that this primarily affects. However, President Trump will no doubt take advantage of the situation to increase the production of the U.S. military industrial complex, not just to refill American stockpiles of necessary high-tech weapons, but also to increase Ukraine's power and ability to resist, to raise the cost in transactional terms, to raise the cost to Mr. Putin for not coming to a peace agreement, and make that cost much higher than the cost of continuing, make the cost of continuing the war much higher than coming to a deal and reaching a peace agreement, or at the very least, an armistice.
I think that Trump has to be advised on the threat of this new alliance that Russia fostered and built for the last several years, which include North Korea, Iran, and partially China. I'm more careful about China because China is really dependent on its trade with the West, United States and Europe. So therefore, they cannot openly be on the side of Russia, same as Iran and North Korea. But it's still there. It's helping Russia a lot. It's buying Russian social products and so on.
And as I have mentioned previously, one of the keys to neutralizing this alliance is to construct what I call the Worldwide Strategic Defense Matrix, WISDOM, which emphasizes not only the massive buildup of ballistic missile defenses of all types by NATO nations as well as the United States to create a worldwide matrix that can help neutralize the nuclear missile arsenals of this emerging alliance, but at the same time, and President Trump would certainly like this, upgrading the Space Force that he created with a space fleet that would be armed with lasers capable of shooting down Russian missiles or other missiles in their boost phase. And that would complete the system of interlocking shields around the opposing alliance, neutralize the one thing that would make them a great power in their own perception, their nuclear missile arsenals, and provide a greater basis for strategic stability. So right now, and of course, who better to provide the space fleet than Mr. Musk, Elon Musk? He's SpaceX right there. He can just simply fill an order from the Pentagon to say, okay, we'd like about 12 of your Falcon 9s, 12 of your Falcon Heavies, and 12 of your Starships, and start refitting them for use by the Space Force. And that's, by the way, that would be much easier for the United States and in particular, Elon Musk in particular, to do than his current plans for colonizing Mars, which are much more logistically demanding and are much more problematic in terms of the human factor. He's going to have a great deal of difficulty convincing 100 colonists, prospective Martian colonists, to climb into a chemically powered starship, which takes about 6 to 7 months to make it to Mars. I mean, you think about the potential for the human engineering factor, people just screwing up or just engaging in dysfunctional behavior on such a journey. Compared to that, upgrading the Space Force is much easier.
What do you think would be required number of police to govern this 100 people?
No, that's another thing. On board a starship with 100 people confined into a crowded space, how many of those would have to be security people to ensure behavior in case someone goes stir crazy in a confined space during a journey to Mars? I mean, the odds of that happening are much higher than people think. And I would point to the old biodome experiment, where they had these people on Earth in a confined space trying to grow their own food and in total isolation, and they found that they had to cheat repeatedly on the rules in order for the experiment to continue working. So if they could not do, and if those things were to occur out in space, the mission is scrubbed. They have to abort and return to Earth immediately or face immediate destruction. So there are a lot of human behavioral factors about people in confined spaces on a long journey, which I don't think the people involved in the Martian colonization project, I don't think they have fully taken that into account, or they are unwilling to mention it to the powers that be.
Yeah, and I think in addition to few policemen, so I would say it's 1 for 10 people, so it means 10 policemen. But see, the danger is that 100 astronauts can easily overpower 10 policemen.
Yes.
And although, because they're very clever people, they will easily identify who is policeman and who is not.
And then the other thing is that in the current space missions, what you have maybe three. You had 3 Apollo astronauts. You could screen those people very intensively to make sure that they all got along very well and were very self-disciplined, even under trying circumstances. That had to happen. But the larger the crew that you have on board, and the longer the duration, the chances of dysfunctional behavior, disruptive behavior taking place in that crew, it doesn't go up arithmetically; it goes up exponentially. So it's something that people have overlooked. That not enough attention has been paid to that. But even so, it's controllable with an upgraded Space Force, because you would limit the crew on those starships to 10. You don't need 100 people on a starship to execute a Space Force mission. 10 would be the logical limit. And you could sustain that over the long by screening those people carefully. And because they're in Earth orbit, or at most, you would have a couple of lunar starships forming the lunar base. It's all controllable. It's all within tolerable timelines. But not if they have to stay any longer, because the length of tours for a Space Force mission in that would be logically 6 months in space, 6 months in low Earth orbit, 1 year maximum. And then you get them back because they have to recover from the effects of low gravity. And there are certain deteriorations that take place. We know this already. So it's complicated, but it's doable, much more doable. And that once the Space Force, as part of the worldwide strategic defense matrix, is in place and operating, then that is a very powerful deterrent, a very powerful stabilizing force for Western powers against any alliance that Russia and the so-called BRICS might want to try to work with. And they can't exactly respond by forming their own strategic defense, because our security is not wholly dependent upon strategic defense or our ability to destroy them. If we have neutralized their nuclear weapons, they're as good as done.
John, a quick question. Of course, I'm aware that this project is really brilliant once implemented. And if that's the case, technology exists, it has to be perfected at some point. Why U.S. is not doing that now?
We don't know that they're not doing that.
If they are not doing that, yes. If they
we do not know that they are not. The fact that I am mentioning this, I mentioned this kind of concept many years ago in my published book, The Russian View of U.S. Strategy, back in 1993. It's been out there in the open. These ideas are out there, certainly in unclassified form.
30 years ago.
Over 30 years ago.
Yep.
Which tells you, says, there people are looking at me and saying, "Good God, the man must be immortal."
No, okay, that's easy.
What is his lifespan? But anyway.
Well, 30 years ago or so the Soviet Union fell apart. So there was probably no need to hurry up and
right. There was no urgency. The
urgency could arise around 2014 with annexation of Crimea, which shows that Putin is getting ready for much more serious involvement against West, and so therefore somehow such system should be erected if that was a decision like that. But you're right, we don't know about that. So maybe it's already being done, maybe it's already exists. Although, like what you learn,
And basically, what all that is needed is the political will or the political decision of the president, and he doesn't have to declare it openly. He can declare it in very tightly controlled, secure circles to implement that decision. And the things that need to be carried out would be more public, but not necessarily the orders by the president, which could be highly classified, to implement such a system. Now, that's up to Mr. Trump. He may want to, in fact, publicize the implementation of a worldwide strategic defense matrix. Certainly, President Reagan wasn't bashful about declaring the Strategic Defense Initiative. So, but I can tell you, just based on previous discussions and my previous research, is that the one thing that the Russian political and military leadership fear above all else, regardless of any other statements they try to make to the contrary, they fear the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes Russia a great power in its own perception, their nuclear missile arsenal. And by extension, this would neutralize the Chinese nuclear arsenal, the North Korean nuclear arsenal, as well as the Iranian nuclear arsenal, should it ever emerge. So that is a very powerful lever which the incoming Trump administration has available to it, should they choose to make use of it.
Okay, there are 2 points I would like to make. Number one, if you keep it in a complete secret, then you are copying the Russian president in Dr. Strangelove, when he kept it as a secret, and when Dr. Strangelove confronts Russian ambassador, and he says, all purpose of the doomsday machine is to let everybody know about it, and why you idiots kept it in secret. And he says we were about to do it on Monday when there would be a next party conference or something like this. This is one. Number two, the danger is if Reagan, it was a bluff obviously at that time, although Russian believed
it was something of a bluff. He said he was truthful. He was calling it the Strategic Defense Initiative. He was declaring it as a research and development initiative.
The Russians themselves made it real.
The Russians themselves overreacted to the Strategic Defense Initiative
because they couldn't have anything on their own similar to that.
And the KGB had sent a report to Gorbachev in '85 saying that their estimate was that SDI would eventually be able to neutralize 90% of Soviet missiles in a first strike, and there was no way they could keep up with the capability. They also were reacting very visibly to the Patriot system. I was a Brigade S2 back in 1985 in Germany. My brigade commander had asked me to say, hey, Captain Lockwood, you read those Russian military journals. So look at them and see if they're saying anything about Patriot. Well, I found in the January 1985 issue of Vestnik Protivovosdushnoy Oborony, Herald of Anti-Aircraft Defense, I found an article on U.S. medium to high altitude air defense systems. And the last third of the article, the author was talking about Patriot. And he identified Patriot as a protivoraketnoy obrony, anti-missile weapon. He was identified as an ABM system. And he said that it would be capable of defending strategic targets in the United States. Now, we weren't talking about that, but the Russians were. They saw Patriot as the leading edge of SDI. This is what was the first weapon system in President Reagan's SDI Star Wars program. And so they have been reacting that visibly to Patriot ever since. And wouldn't you know it, in the Russian-Ukrainian war, Patriot demonstrated, yes, it is that effective. It really is as effective as you're afraid it is. We went ahead and perfected it. So Patriot, along with other systems and laser weapons that the U.S. certainly has, if they are properly integrated and organized in much the same way that the Germans took World War I technology and created blitzkrieg out of that after the First World War, if they successfully integrate the existing technologies which we already have and can produce, then we will be able to create the worldwide strategic defense matrix, a system which can neutralize missile-delivered nuclear weapons and do so very effectively. We can do it partially already at the operational range, at the theater range. It's very effective. If we supplement that with laser weapons that are mounted on starships based in low Earth orbit, then you have a very powerful defensive system which will basically neutralize Russia's options, and for that matter, all of our adversaries' options for using nuclear missiles in the future. Not unless they go ahead and start competing with their own space fleets, which for them would be prohibitively expensive and really easy to spot.
Well, don't you think that if Russian will feel that this is exactly the case, and such system will be sooner or later erected, if it's not already there will be a temptation of the first all-out strike. Because if such system would exist, then Russia will be reduced to really, really nothing strategically.
Again, how eager are they? How eager are they to commit national suicide?
Yeah, that's beside the point. Yeah,
and so it's I tend to take the attitude of about having a ballistic missile defense system. My attitude is similar to that of the late science fiction author Robert Heinlein, where he was talking about having a gun. His attitude was, I would rather have a gun and not need it than need a gun and not have
it. Very good observation. Very
so we would rather have a worldwide ballistic missile defense system and not need it than need it and not have it. So in this case, if your desire is to eliminate nuclear weapons as effective weapons of war, it does not eliminate the problem of war entirely, but it does transform what is a greater problem into a somewhat lesser, more manageable problem. And that all by itself is a very worthwhile achievement.
Yeah. Now, speaking about what's happening these days in Ukraine, it seems to me that until December 24th of last year, there was one type of war. And starting January 1st, 2025, it's a different war. Why I'm saying so? Number one, economically, stops of all deliveries of Russian gas through Ukraine to Europe. It's done and over. So there will be no more gas, even for great friends of Ukraine like Slovakia or Hungary, quote unquote, which will be forced to find some other sources of gas. And I'm not talking about cheap gas. I'm talking about gas itself at any payments or any shape or form. Now, on a battlefield, Ukraine is demonstrating completely new ways of fighting the war, especially on the Black Sea. They've destroyed already 1/3 of Russian fleet, and they have now powerful drones they're being powered, and they're using the missile technology to hit helicopters who would pursue them, and they did just two days or two ago. And they are developing incredibly inventive new type of weapons or combination of weapons never used and never heard of before. On the other hand, Russians, they're not inventing anything. They're bringing North Korean soldiers who
are they're going through their old World War II stockpiles.
Yeah, that's right. And this apparently has been discovered.
All that guarantees is a higher casualty rate. Those old stockpiles will be destroyed even faster than their modern weapons were.
What they've discovered is that North Korean soldiers are very, very thirsty for vodka, and no less than Russian soldiers. So there's not enough vodka for both Russians and Korean soldiers, especially in the Kursk region where North Koreans are mostly now being located. So Russians are not getting too upset when more and more Koreans are being killed, because that would leave more vodka for Russian forces. And to fight such a war without vodka, frankly, it's almost impossible.
Mm.
Because most of the North Koreans and especially Russians, they even don't understand what they're doing there and why they're fighting. Now, with the vodka, it makes it a little bit easier to accept their fate. So this is so what's happening on the
Yeah.
battle.
So basically, the Ukrainian forces have a huge advantage in morale. They have a huge advantage in defensive weaponry, and they are becoming increasingly confident that the incoming Trump administration is not going to throw them under the bus, is not going to sacrifice them to Russia just for the sake of obtaining a peace agreement, which would not be worth the paper it's written on. So it I am still cautiously optimistic that Ukraine is going to see an opportunity here in the very near future to throw a decisive offensive counterpunch against Russia in a decisive area, which will unmistakably show Mr. Putin that he has lost. And I still contend that the most decisive area for a Ukrainian counterstrike would be in Crimea. Seal it off, cut off logistical as well as other reinforcements to Crimea, and then Ukraine can commit whatever strategic reserves it has available to go into Crimea and basically force the surrender of the occupying Russian forces, who,
Uh,
who by the way, will probably be subjected to some really serious partisan activity on the part of the Ukrainians.
yeah, agree. And what's interesting is that it's now 6 months. So for 5 months already, Ukrainians are occupied Kursk region, and there is nothing Russians can do about it. Now, with the help of North Korean contingents, there nothing could be done. Well, that it tells me something that if US will not even go full tilt to help Ukraine, but just will continue to do something similar to what Biden just did, I think slowly but surely Ukraine will take over this war. And with that, I would like to thank you, Jonathan, for today's program. And I will see you on Tuesday, same place, same time. Have a great
Excellent.
weekend. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.